The desert does not forgive. It strips a soul bare until nothing is left but truth and scars. In the summer of 1874, Clara Whitcomb learned this the hard way. Once the proud daughter of a preacher, she was left with nothing but ashes when raiders tore her family's wagon to splinters. The screams still haunted her. The fire still burned in her mind, and the shame they forced upon her made her a ghost among the living. But Clara wasn't ready to vanish into the dust. Broken and hunted, she stumbled into the wilderness, where a man with sins of his own would change everything. She ran. For days, it seemed, though her sense of time dissolved with the heat. Her bonnet was gone, her lips cracked and bleeding, her dress torn at the hem. Once she had water. Now the jug was empty, and her prayers had turned to dust on her tongue. By the time Clara stumbled upon the thin line of smoke rising against a darkening sky, she no longer knew if she was walking toward salvation or her own grave. Her knees buckled. She fell face first into the sand. The scent of rabbit stew, faint but real, drifted from somewhere ahead. Bootsteps crunched against gravel. A man's voice, low and wary, cut through the desert hush. "Easy now, miss. Don't move too quick." Clara tried to lift her head. The world swam. A shadow loomed above her broad shoulders, a weathered face, eyes that did not belong to the sort of man who lived among good folks. An outlaw. She could feel it in the way he held himself, half ready to fight, half ready to flee. He knelt, sliding one strong arm beneath her shoulders, tilting a canteen to her lips. Water touched her mouth. She swallowed greedily, tears springing to her eyes at the miracle of it. "Name's Eli," he said after a pause, though the name caught in his throat as if it weren't the whole truth. "Been camped out here a while." Clara gripped his sleeve with trembling fingers, her voice a rasp. They took everything. My kin, my name. I can't go back." Her gaze locked onto his, desperate and unflinching. "But if you'll marry me tonight, I'll give you everything I am, even if I'm broken." The outlaw's hand stilled on the canteen. The firelight caught his jaw as he turned, as though testing her words against the weight of his sins. No preacher, no papers, just a woman with nothing left to trade but herself, and a man, hiding under a false name, who had long forgotten the sound of a vow. Eli swallowed, the night wind howling through the canyon like a witness. "Girl," he murmured, "you don't know what you're asking." But Clara only clutched tighter, whispering through cracked lips, "I know. And I'd rather be a broken wife than a forgotten ghost." The desert went silent, waiting for his answer. The desert night fell heavy, its silence broken only by the crackle of Eli's campfire. Stars spread wide above them, hard and cold like the eyes of heaven itself. Clara sat hunched beneath his weathered coat, her body trembling from more than just the chill. Hunger gnawed at her belly, grief at her heart. But still, she looked at him as if he alone could save her from being swallowed whole by the wilderness. Eli paced near the fire, jaw tight. He had seen plenty of desperate folks out here, miners with dust in their lungs, soldiers haunted by war, women searching for husbands who'd never return. But this girl's plea unsettled him in ways he didn't care to admit. "You don't even know me," he said, voice rough. "You don't know the blood I've got on my hands." Clara raised her chin, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I don't need to know your sins. I only need to know if you'll stand beside me when the world would rather see me buried." The words struck him like a bullet. For a moment, Eli turned away, the firelight glinting off the scar that cut across his jaw. He wasn't Eli, not really. His true name still echoed on wanted posters in towns he dared not ride through. He had sworn never to bind himself to anyone again, not with the law dogging his shadow, not with hell waiting just beyond the horizon. And yet, here was this preacher's daughter, ragged and broken, asking not for pity, but for a vow. He poured whiskey into a tin cup, drank deep, then set it aside with a sharp clatter. "All right," he said finally, his voice low, a growl pulled from someplace deep. "You want a husband? I'll give you one. But understand this. Eli Collins died 5 years ago. What stands before you is a man who's got no right to promise heaven, only grit and maybe a grave. Clara's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile, not quite relief. Then promise me grit. Promise me a grave beside yours. That's enough. Eli cursed under his breath, but his hands didn't shake as he pulled a strip of rawhide from his pack. He looped it clumsily around her finger, a poor man's ring under the indifferent stars. There, by firelight and starlight. It's done, he said. You're my wife now. Clara Collins, if that's a name you'll take. One ate her breath caught. She touched the rawhide ring as though it were gold. It's more than I had this morning. For the first time in years, Eli felt something shift in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but the faintest spark of something he thought long buried. The desert wind sighed through the canyon, carrying their words into eternity. Husband and wife, bound not by law or preacher, but by desperation and the fragile thread of hope. Clara leaned against him, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. Eli stared into the fire, the weight of her against his shoulder. In the flames, he saw not just her survival, but his own salvation flickering to life. But shadows stirred at the canyon's edge. Far off, the faint beat of hoofbeats carried through the night. Someone was coming. The sound grew louder, carrying across the desert floor like thunder rolling low against the mountains. Clara stirred, her head heavy against Eli's shoulder. He lifted a hand, steadying her, his body taut as a bowstring. Stay here, he whispered. Her fingers clutched his sleeve. Is it them? The raiders? Eli didn't answer. His eyes had gone flat, calculating. He moved to his horse, retrieved the rifle from its scabbard, and crouched near the fire's edge, where shadow met flame. He knew the rhythm of hooves. This wasn't a wandering traveler, it was a hunting party. The first rider appeared against the starlit ridge. Then another. 3 silhouettes, hard and sharp as the steel they carried. U.S. Marshals. Eli's gut turned cold. He'd spent years outrunning that silver star, and now it glinted just yards from the woman who bore his name. The riders slowed, their lanterns swinging as they searched the canyon floor. Eli doused the fire with a swift kick of sand, plunging them into near darkness. Clara gasped softly, clutching her shawl tighter. Don't breathe a word, Eli hissed. The marshals' voices carried faintly on the wind. Tracks lead this way. He's close. Ain't no outlaw can run forever. Clara's eyes widened. She turned toward Eli, her voice trembling though barely a whisper. They're hunting you. Eli met her gaze, his face hard, unreadable. I told you I was no good man. The riders passed above, their lantern glow sweeping across stone and brush. For a moment, it lingered near the camp, and Clara felt her heart slam against her ribs. But then the light moved on, swallowed by the canyon bend. The hoofbeats faded, though not far. They would circle back. Eli lowered the rifle, but his shoulders remained rigid. They'll keep coming, he muttered. Always do. Clara touched the rawhide strip on her finger, her hand shaking. If they find you, they'll hang you. His laugh was bitter, hollow. That was the bargain I struck long before you stumbled into my fire. No, she said fiercely, surprising them both. That was the bargain you struck with yourself. But you're not alone anymore. Her words pierced through the armor he'd worn for years. Eli turned away, jaw clenched, but he couldn't shake the truth of it. Alone, he might have run deeper into the desert, let the marshals chase him until either death or mercy claimed him. But now there was a woman who had tied her fate to his, with nothing more than rawhide and faith. The desert grew quiet again, but danger pressed closer with every heartbeat. Eli slung the rifle over his shoulder, voice grim. If you're staying with me, Clara, you'd best be ready. From here on, every step's a fight. She rose unsteadily, eyes steady despite her fear. Then we fight. They made no fire. The canyon floor lay dark, the moon in their only witness. Clara sat with her back against a boulder, her thin frame wrapped in Eli's coat, her eyes wide and restless. The hoofbeats had faded, but the silence left in their wake pressed heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Eli crouched a few feet away, scanning the ridgeline, every muscle strung tight. Finally, he returned to her side, lowering himself onto the sand. He rubbed a hand over his face, weariness showing through the hard edges of his jaw. "You should sleep," he muttered. "I can't," Clara whispered. Her voice cracked, and then softer still. "Not after everything." The words carried more than fear of marshals. They carried the memory of fire and screams, of men who had taken what could never be given back. Eli turned, his eyes catching hers in the pale light. "You think I don't see it?" he said, low, rough. "The way you carry the weight, like if you set it down, you'll crumble." Clara's throat worked. "What choice do I have?" He hesitated, then reached for her hand. His touch was cautious, as if he half expected her to flinch. But she didn't. Her fingers trembled only slightly as they settled in his. "You made me your husband tonight," he said, voice steadier now. "That makes it my burden too." Tears pricked at her lashes. "But you don't even know if I'm whole." His grip tightened, rough but steady. "Don't matter what they took. What matters is what's left, and what we build from it." The desert wind curled around them, carrying the smell of sage and stone. For the first time since the raid, Clara let herself lean fully against another soul. Eli's arm came around her shoulders, drawing her into the hollow of his chest. His warmth seeped through the ragged fabric of her dress, through the ache in her bones. For a long while, neither spoke. The outlaw and the preacher's daughter sat bound, not by law or preacher, but by a vow spoken to survive. Yet beneath it stirred something else, something that frightened them both more than marshals or raiders. Hope. Clara's breathing slowed against his chest. Eli rested his chin lightly atop her hair, his rifle still within reach, his heart beating a rhythm he hadn't known he could still feel. Above them, the stars burned cold and endless. But here, in the hush of the desert night, two broken lives pressed together like splintered wood, trying to hold against the storm. Eli whispered into her hair, words no one else would ever hear. "You're mine now. And God help me, I aim to keep you safe." The vow carried into the darkness, fragile, desperate, and real. Morning came harsh and red, the kind of dawn that set the desert aflame. Clara woke first, the rawhide ring pressing into her finger like a reminder of promises made in shadows. Eli was already on his feet, packing the camp with quick, efficient movements. "We can't linger," he said, his voice flat. "Those marshals will circle back. And worse, raiders don't leave survivors without sniffing for blood." Clara rose unsteadily, clutching his coat around her. "Where do we go?" Eli scanned the ridges. His eyes narrowed at a thin plume of smoke rising far to the east. "Anywhere they ain't." By mid-morning, the desert heat pressed down, waves shimmering off the sand. Clara's lips split with thirst, but she forced herself onward, matching Eli's pace as best she could. Each step was grit against her skin, but she would not be left behind. It was Clara who heard it first, a faint drumming, faster than her own pulse. She froze, heart seizing. "Eli." He turned sharply. The sound swelled, echoing against the canyon walls. Hoofbeats. Not 3 or 4. A dozen, maybe more. Eli's jaw tightened. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a jagged outcrop of rock. They scrambled into the shadows, just as riders burst over the horizon, painted faces, war cries, tearing through the morning stillness. Apache. Clara clung to the rock, breath ragged, as the band thundered past, close enough for her to see the dust rising from their ponies' hooves. Eli crouched beside her, rifle ready, his face carved from stone. "They're scouting," he murmured, when the last rider vanished into the distance. "They'll circle back, and when they do, they'll find us." Her fingers dug into the rock. "Then what?" Eli looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not just an outlaw, but a man carrying the weight of every wrong turn. "Then I stand between you and them, even if it means I fall." Clara's breath caught. "Don't talk like that." He shook his head. "You asked me to be your husband. That means my life's tied to yours now. I'll pay what it costs." The desert fell silent again, but the promise lingered, sharp as a blade. Clara's hand went to the rawhide strip, the only thing tethering her to hope. She whispered, fierce despite the tremor in her voice, "Then we fight together. If you fall, I fall." Eli's gaze held hers. For a heartbeat, The outlaw and the preacher's daughter stood not as fugitives, not as broken souls, but as two people daring the desert to take them whole. The wind shifted. In the distance, the war cries rose again. The horizon was coming for them. The raiders' cries faded into echoes. But Eli knew better than to trust silence. He led Clara deeper into the rocks, every step measured, his rifle balanced against his arm. They found a shallow cave, little more than a crack in the stone, but it offered shade and concealment. Clara sank onto the sand, trembling with exhaustion. Eli crouched at the entrance, eyes never leaving the ridgeline. "You've done this before," she whispered. He glanced back. "Hid from men who wanted me dead? Too many times." Her voice softened. "And you survived every one." Eli's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Don't mean my luck lasts forever." The truth of it sat heavy between them. Clara pressed her hand to her belly, where hunger gnawed like a second heartbeat. For the first time, she asked the question that had lingered since she'd stumbled into his fire. "Why do they hunt you?" Eli didn't answer at once. He stared at the horizon, jaw tight, until finally he spoke low. "Because I killed a man. Maybe two, depending on who tells the story. Shot him in a saloon brawl back in Texas. Law didn't care that one had his gun aimed at me. They just wanted a body to hang." Clara's breath caught. "So you ran." He nodded once. "Changed my name. Learned to live with the shadows." His gaze cut to hers, sharp as flint. "Still want to call me husband?" She lifted her chin, rawhide strip glinting in the dim light. "I do." For the first time in years, Eli's heart faltered. No jury, no preacher, no man had ever spoken words that carried such weight. Only this battered girl in a torn dress, staring at him as if he were more than his sins. He reached across the narrow space, took her hand, and pressed her palm to his chest. His heart thundered beneath. "Then hear this. By blood and breath, I swear no marshal, no raider, no devil himself will touch you while I still draw breath." Clara's eyes stung, but she did not look away. "Then I swear too. Whatever comes, I'll stand with you." The cave held their words, sealing them like scripture carved into stone. A blood oath without blade or altar, but no less binding. Outside, the wind shifted. Dust rose against the horizon. Hoofbeats again, closer this time. The marshals had returned, their lanterns bobbing like ghostly stars against the coming dusk. And far to the south, another cry split the silence. The raiders, circling back. Eli's grip tightened on her hand. "Looks like both hells found us at once." Clara swallowed hard, her voice steady despite the fear. "Then let them come. We made our vow." The desert night thickened, danger pressing from both sides. And in the hollow of the stone, outlaw and bride braced for the storm. By sundown, the canyon burned red with fading light, shadows stretching long across the sand. From the cave's mouth, Eli counted 6 riders moving slow, deliberate marshals. Their silver stars glinted in the dying sun. Clara crouched beside him, her breath shallow. "They'll find us." "Not if the raiders reach them first," Eli muttered. His voice was calm, but his eyes never left the horizon. As if summoned by his words, a shrill cry tore across the desert. Apache riders burst from the southern ridge, dust plumes trailing like smoke. The marshals wheeled their horses, rifles flashing in the fire-colored light. Shots cracked, echoing through stone. Horses screamed. Clara pressed her hands over her ears, but Eli pulled her close. "Listen to me. No matter what happens, you keep to the rocks. Don't run blind into that fight." She looked up at him, terrified. "But I'll do what I must." His jaw clenched. A husband keeps his word. Before she could answer, a bullet sparked against the stone near the cave. Clara gasped. Eli swung his rifle to his shoulder and fired once. Twice the nearest marshal toppled from his saddle. The sound rang like judgment. "Now they know where we are," Clara whispered. "Good." Eli's eyes were steel. "Let 'em come to me, not to you." The canyon became chaos, shouts in English, war cries in Apache, the crack of gunfire and the pounding of hooves. Dust filled the air until it was hard to breathe. A lone marshal broke from the fight, spurring his horse toward the cave. Eli shoved Clara deeper into the shadows. "Stay!" he barked. He stepped into the open, firing before the lawman could raise his pistol. The horse reared, the marshal falling hard to the ground. Eli moved fast, but not fast enough. The man's revolver flashed, and pain tore across Eli's shoulder. He staggered, teeth bared, but did not fall. Clara screamed his name, starting forward, but he raised a hand, sharp as a command. "Stay back!" The marshal lay dying in the dust, the raiders clashing with the others beyond. Blood dripped warm down Eli's arm, soaking his sleeve, yet his rifle stayed steady. Clara crawled to the edge of the cave, trembling. "You'll die out there," she cried. His gaze flicked to hers, fierce, unyielding. "Then I'll die with you watching, knowing I kept the oath." Another shot split the dusk. The battle surged closer, both law and raider converging on their refuge. Clara clutched the rawhide ring, whispering a prayer through her tears. The siege had begun. The canyon roared with gunfire, sparks flashing against stone as night closed in. Smoke clung to the air, choking, acrid. Eli's shoulder burned with every movement, but he kept his rifle steady, each shot measured. One marshal fell, then another, but more pressed forward, using the rocks for cover. Clara crouched in the shadows, her hands shaking so badly she thought she might drop the tin pistol Eli had thrust into her palm before stepping into the fray. It felt foreign, heavy, like holding death itself. She pressed her back against the stone, whispering through her teeth, "Lord, guide my hand." A sudden blur, a raider vaulted from the rocks above, blade gleaming. Eli spun, too slow this time. The warrior's knife slashed across his sleeve, grazing his ribs. Eli grunted, swinging the rifle stock hard. Wood cracked bone. The raider fell, but not before the blade carved deeper. Blood spread dark across Eli's shirt. "Eli!" Clara cried, breaking from cover despite his command. Another marshal lunged from the side, revolver raised toward Eli's back. Clara lifted the pistol, her breath caught between terror and resolve. She fired. The recoil jolted her arm, the sound ringing in her ears. The lawman staggered, eyes wide with shock, before crumpling into the dust. Clara stood frozen, the pistol smoking in her grip, her whole body trembling. Eli turned, his eyes locking on hers. For a moment, time slowed the battle, the cries, the chaos all fell away. He saw not a preacher's daughter, not a broken soul, but a woman standing between him and death. His voice broke through the din, rough but steady. "Good girl." Then the canyon shook again, shouts, hoofbeats. The remaining marshals pulled back under the weight of the raiders' charge. Horses thundered past, arrows hissing through the air. One buried itself in the stone inches from Clara's head. She ducked, gasping. Eli grabbed her wrist, pulling her against the wall. "We can't hold here. They'll burn us out." Even as he spoke, firelight flickered along the canyon floor. A raider had set dry brush ablaze, the flames leaping fast in the dry wind. Smoke curled, thick and suffocating, filling their refuge. Clara coughed, clutching his arm. "Where do we go?" Eli's jaw tightened, eyes darting to the narrow path that snaked up the cliffside. "Up. Only chance we got." Another gunshot cracked. The fire roared louder. Behind them, shadows closed in. Eli shoved the rifle strap across his back, gritted his teeth against the wound, and pulled Clara forward. "Stay close. Don't stop for anything." Hand in hand, they plunged into the smoke, climbing toward the ridge while chaos consumed the canyon below. The climb tore at Clara's lungs, every step up the jagged path a battle against smoke and fear. Eli's grip never left her hand, though his blood trailed dark on the rocks. Below, the canyon glowed orange, flames devouring brush, swallowing the bodies of men who had come to kill. At the ridge they collapsed, gasping in the cold night air. Clara pressed her palm to Eli's wound, desperate to slow the bleeding. "You're losing too much." He caught her wrist, shaking his head. "Later. We've got to keep moving." But movement found them first. A voice rang sharp through the night. "Drop the gun, Collins." Clara froze. 3 marshals stood at the ridge's edge, revolvers aimed steady. Their stars gleamed in the moonlight. Behind them, One carried a torch, the firelight throwing their faces into cruel relief. Eli stiffened, shoulders squared. Despite the blood soaking his shirt, his rifle hung heavy in his grip, but he didn't raise it. His gaze swept over the men, landing on the youngest, narrow-faced eyes sharp. Recognition flared in Eli's expression. "Dawson," he muttered. The marshal smirked. "Didn't think you'd remember. My brother was one of the men you shot in Texas." Clara's stomach twisted. She looked from Eli to Dawson, seeing the weight of years between them. "Eli?" she whispered. His jaw worked, but he didn't deny it. "It was him or me." Dawson's smile was cold. "And now it's you." The torchlight shifted, illuminating Clara's face, the rawhide strip still tied around her finger. Dawson's sneer deepened. "And you've taken a wife. Preacher's girl, if I'm not mistaken. What would your father say, Miss Whitcomb? Running with a killer?" Clara straightened, trembling but unflinching. "My father would say no man is beyond redemption." The words hit like a stone cast into still water. Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Redemption doesn't bring back the dead." One of the older marshals muttered, "Dawson, enough jowin'. Shoot him and be done." Eli shifted subtly, his body placing itself between Clara and their guns. His voice dropped low. "If it's me you want, then let her walk. She ain't done nothing." Clara clutched his arm. "No, quiet," he hissed, eyes never leaving Dawson. The marshal raised his revolver, steady as stone. For a breathless moment, the desert held still, the smoke, the stars, the fire below, all waiting on a single pull of a trigger. Then a war cry split the night. Raiders burst from the darkness, arrows whistling. The marshals scattered, gunfire erupting wild. Eli seized Clara's hand, dragging her into the scrub. "Run!" he barked. They plunged into the shadows, the clash of vengeance and survival erupting behind them. Clara's heart hammered, but one truth burned hotter than the fire they left behind. Whatever awaited them next, betrayal and blood, had already bound them tighter than any vow. The desert night swallowed them whole. Clara stumbled over scrub and stone, Eli dragging her forward, though his strength faltered with every step. Blood darkened his shirt, sticky against her hand where she clung to him. Behind, the chaos of battle rang out gunfire, screams, the guttural cry of raiders colliding with marshals. The sound chased them, but it was the silence between volleys that chilled Clara most. Somewhere in that silence, death walked. They reached a dry wash, its banks deep enough to hide them. Eli sank against the dirt wall, chest heaving. Clara dropped beside him, pressing her shawl against his wound. "You can't keep running," she whispered, her voice cracking. He gave a bitter laugh. "Ain't that all I've ever done?" His eyes found hers, dark and burning. "Maybe it's time I stopped." Fear surged through her. "Don't say that." But Eli's gaze softened, almost tender. "You made me a husband in the dust, Clara. That means something, even if the law says it don't. A man don't run from his wife. Not forever." Hoofbeats approached, measured this time, not wild. Marshals. Clara's pulse spiked as lantern light swept across the wash. Shadows danced along the ridge above. Eli pushed the rifle into her hands. "Stay low." "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not without you." He managed a faint smile, blood on his teeth. "Then stand with me." He rose, unsteady but unyielding, climbing the bank. Clara followed, her heart hammering. At the ridge, Dawson and two marshals leveled their guns, lanterns blazing. "End of the trail, Collins," Dawson said coldly. "On your knees." Eli squared his shoulders, his hand brushing Clara's as she stood beside him. "I won't kneel." The marshals raised their revolvers. Clara's breath seized. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the wash. "If you kill him, you'll have to kill me too. I am his wife. His fate is mine." Dawson hesitated, anger flickering. "You'd damn yourself for him?" Her chin lifted, rawhide glinting in the lamplight. "No, I'd save him by standing where no one else will." The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring. Eli's hand brushed hers, grounding her. Then the night erupted, raiders' war cries again, arrows hissing from the shadows. One marshal fell with a scream, another's lantern shattered, plunging them into chaos. Dawson cursed, firing blindly into the dark. Eli seized Clara's hand, pulling her down the bank as arrows whistled overhead. They tumbled into the wash, scrambling through dust and stone. When at last the cries faded, only silence remained thick, absolute. Eli collapsed beside her, his breath ragged, his eyes glassy. Clara cradled him, her tears falling hot. "We're not done," she whispered fiercely. "Do you hear me? We're not done." But Eli's gaze was distant, locked on the stars. "One last stand," he rasped, "and it was with you." His head fell against her shoulder, as dawn's first pale light crept over the desert. The first light of dawn painted the desert in shades of gold and ash. Clara sat in the dry wash, Eli's head heavy against her shoulder, his breath shallow as though each one might be his last. She pressed her palm to his wound, whispering prayers into the silence. "You can't leave me," she murmured. "Not after all this. Not now." Eli's eyes fluttered open, catching hers. The strength in them was fading, yet something stubborn still burned. "I told you, I'd keep you safe." "You already have," Clara said fiercely. "Now let me keep you." She tore the hem from her dress, binding the wound as best she could. Every motion was desperate, but her hands stayed steady. She had lost too much already, she would not lose him too. Hoofbeats stirred in the distance. Clara tensed, ready to shield him with her own body. But when the riders appeared, it wasn't marshals or raiders. It was settlers, 2 wagons, a family fleeing the same dangers that haunted the plains. The eldest of the men spotted her, dismounted, and knelt beside Eli without hesitation. "Bullets lodged deep, but he ain't gone yet," he said, voice grave. "We'll get him to Willow Rock. My wife knows how to tend a wound." Clara's throat tightened. "Please, help him." Together they lifted Eli into the wagon. Clara climbed in beside him, never letting go of his hand. The wheels creaked forward, carrying them across the waking desert. Hours blurred. At some point Eli stirred, his lips brushing her ear. "Clara." She bent low. "I'm here." His hand squeezed hers, faint but certain. "You gave me a name again, a reason. Even if I don't make it, know this: I died a husband." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She pressed his rawhide ring to her lips. "No, you'll live. And when you do, we'll build more than vows in the dust. We'll build a life." For the first time, Eli didn't argue. His eyes closed, but peace settled over his face, as though at last the running had ended. By the time the wagons reached the valley, smoke from Willow Rock's chimneys rose against the sky. Clara held him still, whispering every promise she had left. Whether he lived or died, she knew one truth carved deeper than fear. Love had not been given to them freely. It had been fought for, clawed from the desert with blood and grit. And in that, it was stronger than law, stronger than shame. It was unshakable. If Clara and Eli's journey gripped your heart, if you believe love on the frontier was forged, not in comfort, but in fire and sacrifice, then join us again. Subscribe to Western Love Legends for more stories like this. And don't forget to like, because out here, every tale of love is a legend waiting to be told.